Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we talk about firefighter and paramedic line of duty deaths to learn from these tragic events and potentially prevent them from happening in the future. I'm Paul, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Dirk and Denny. First of all, an apology to all our listeners. I took a long hiatus over the summer since our last episode that was recorded in May. But we're back now. So thank you all for your patience, and hope you look forward to listening to new episodes as we produce them over the winter. You know, summer is so short in Canada, it's hard to break away and do recordings when we're busy camping and traveling and all that kind of stuff. Dirk and Denny, how's it going today? What's new?
It's it's been an interesting summer. Those who think there's no climate change occurring are not paying attention, not getting into what's causing it, but it's definitely happening. We had an unusually dry spring, and as a result of that, there were some, for Nova Scotia, massive wildland fires. And the one that I was concerned with happened in the wildland urban interface, and I was concerned with it because it burned out my subdivision. And we lost 1/3 of our homes in our subdivision, and we were the last stop. The fire didn't continue because the sun went down, the wind changed, and it got cooler and more humid. But there was a crossover. The temperature was pushing 30, and the humidity was in the 20s and teens, and there were high winds, and it was a conflagration. And there was a lot of issues with emergency response communications, evacuation routes, and so forth. Anyways, so we've been recovering since then, fixing our home. I have a wooded lot. I lost probably 3/4 of an acre of forest and wildland off of my lot. My house was fine because I followed FireSmart, and I had my FireSmart boundaries around my house. I had my gutters covered. I did not leave combustibles around. All my bushes and stuff that were close to the house were not evergreens, and I had no mulch that wasn't stone. So my house survived, but I got some fantastic video all around, and unfortunately, my video shows 10 houses all around my house burning to the ground. It's been a nightmare.
Amazing.
And, dealing with the insurance companies, dealing with recovering, and I still haven't got my siding fixed, and we're 5 months after?
June, July,
August, September,
interesting October. To note, to build on that one, Denny, thank you for sharing that. Is the National Institute of Science and Technology just released recommendations for municipalities on public alerting, evacuation, and sheltering in place. They just released a report based on the Camp Fire in Paradise, California, a few years ago.
High fatality fire.
Right, 96 dead, 19,000 structures, something like that. But
Zero for us, luckily.
They released recommendations on that that go exactly to what you're saying: the public alerting, the evacs, and the other thing, of course, is that one in Hawaii, Lanahai, where that one house built in the 50s survived. But the trick is, like you said, there was no combustibles around the home. There was no combustible mulch. It was all rock. The soffits and eaves troughs were resistant to fire, and the house survived. So, I mean, It can be done, but it takes a little bit of effort.
And knowledge. And my residents, my neighbors around me, FireSmart, city wasn't promoting it.
Right.
Province wasn't promoting it. I mean, it was out there, but you had to go and self-find it yourself. There was very little activity in that area. And even shockingly now, there still isn't really much.
That's amazing.
So we're pressuring the governments, both municipal and provincial, to get the residents more involved in analyzing what was good and what was bad about this response. And so far, there's been dead silence and or pushback. So this is not the first wildland fire that's happened in this municipality. It is at least the 6th. I was involved in a major post-incident review of one of those fires, and my view of that is that despite the 11 years that have passed since, the number of internalized lessons is low, and the same thing is repeating itself. And I think that's the most discouraging part about it is if you don't learn from your experiences, you're going to relive them. It's just a matter of time. And we had no fatalities, but we lost 150 homes. One subdivision alone lost 100. So it was extremely bad. One road in, one road out, and it was a nightmare.
There was
So
an article a couple of weeks ago. Somebody was talking, I think it was in Alberta here somewhere, is, yeah, okay, so we got the evacuation thing kind of figured out. In Canada, there's been all kinds of wildfires this year, and lots of evacuations, and no fatalities. But that's not enough. We need to figure out how to protect the community so we don't have these huge losses. It's costing
yeah,
the economy and the emotional strain and the people and everything. Yellowknife, was it Yellowknife, right, that got evacuated?
yeah,
And they're saying people aren't moving back.
yeah,
Just like Fort Mac, they lost a whole bunch of population because
yeah,
they're not going to do this again. So we need to
yeah.
work on that.
Yeah, but people have their emergency plans and evacuation plans in place, and they think they're adequate. Like for instance, there's an elementary school, and their plan is to bring in a bunch of buses and transport the kids away. I
Right.
said, that's I was at a meeting, public meeting, and I said, that's a good plan. However, you need to know in advance that the fire is going to be heading your way in order for you to get the buses in, and then the buses have got to fight the traffic to get in and out again. It's this, you know, when you're not telling people that they're in danger, they're in the path, then how are they supposed to enact their plans?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
you notice when your backyard's on fire, that's too late.
I guess we
So
need an episode on this, huh, Dirk?
It,
Maybe.
it sounds like it. Yeah, that'd be just talking about all that. I mean, we
yeah,
had we had Slave Lake in Alberta. We had
Fort McMurray.
Fort McMurray, right? I mean, plus the flooding in Calgary and the High River, right? All these major events, and then I'm not sure if we actually learn lessons from that.
right.
Uh,
And you look at the Northwest Territories, the evacuating, and you're looking at a 24-hour drive out. And so, you've suddenly got every resident north of you is coming into your corner store and gas station because they're running for their lives. Did you plan for that and made sure you get extra fuel? The answer to that is no.
Good. Good. Yeah. Well, no, sorry for your
Anyways,
summer. And then you had a hurricane after that too.
we've actually had two hurricanes.
Two
We had
hurricanes now.
Hurricane Lee, which ripped a bunch of shingles off my my ridge line vent. So I repaired that. And then we just had Tropical Storm Philippe, which just came through last weekend, which was luckily a overbilled, underrated event.
Moved to Nova Scotia. Dirk, how about you? You had a busy summer.
uh I was pretty busy. I finished teaching the class there in June, end of
Oh yeah,
June.
recruit class, right?
Recruit class, yeah. And then so that was a beautiful spring for us, and I missed all that because I was just busy. So I didn't go camping. Didn't even move my trailer out of my yard, so it's
Oh,
kind of
that's
like a
sad.
bummer. But July, August, yeah, we went to Spain and Portugal, so that was a very relaxing vacation. It wasn't too hot up there because my wife picked that spot because it wasn't that hot.
Good
While we
thinking.
had 28, 30, I think the hottest day was 35. The south of Spain and Portugal was cooking at 45 degrees. And when we were heading out at the beginning of August, the wildfires just started in the southern part of Portugal. So, but we weren't affected by it. So that was, it was pretty nice. And then, well, September hit and I was busy in the yard, and then I got my promotion finally after 18 years.
Captain,
Promoted to
congratulations.
junior captain. Yeah, yeah, that's the last promotion I'll get in my career. So that's as good as it gets. And yeah, I'll enjoy the ride for the next six years. I just turned 54, so 6 more years on my exchange, and yeah, go from
And
there. So
you
yeah, I'm looking forward to the podcast, and I hope we can get this done once a month at least, and
and you
maybe have
taught
that. Yeah,
you
that
taught some
wildfire.
courses too. What did you teach here a
I did
couple of
teach
weeks
a couple
ago?
courses. Yeah, I did teach IFSTA 101, Firefighter 101. And then I went to a couple courses. I didn't teach. I participated in an engine ops fundamental course in the Rocky Mountain House. We had Todd Edwards from Atlanta there, retired battalion chief, demoted captain, promoted, demoted, fired. It was an interesting
That's good.
story.
The engine ops course, because Atlanta's got no engines. It's been all over the news. They're short of trucks or something.
Yeah, so he's been retired. He's been
Uh,
teaching mainly host deployments. That's his shtick. And then we had Kyle Romagus from Texas, Montgomery County, and he was teaching host advancements, flowing. We had Jerry Herbst from Elkhart Brass. He was showing us how to do hose and nozzle evaluations with
brass tacks and hard facts from
brass
Elkhart
tacks and
Brass,
hard
right?
facts.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. And then we had Brent Brooks from Toronto. He was 17 years on their high rise rigs. And we talked about high rise fires and procedures and how to use the 65 in a high rise setting and upscale, downscale. And so, yeah, it was super interesting to see this flow below nozzle. And well, I think originally it's called Cockloft nozzle, but they want to call it opposing stream nozzle, just so you don't limit the use just by the name. But we played around with it; was fantastic. Like we talked a lot about those cladding fires as well, where you can use these, or from the flanking. If you have balcony over and you can get water into that apartment, and so yeah, it was super interesting. Unfortunately, every single part of this conference could have been a whole conference by itself. Well, it's kind of like 4 hours high rise training, um, right? It was a little bit short. Same with host advancements and stretching, but yeah, it was super interesting just to talk to these guys and hang out with them. And I got to drive them actually. I got to pick them up from the airport, so I was kind of like starstruck. That was pretty cool. Uh, and so yeah, and I'm gonna go to Seattle here on flying to Vancouver and then drive down to Seattle on Sunday for the Pacific Northwest Foods Conference. It's going to be 12 presenters, 3 days. So it's going to be awesome.
What's fools? What's fools?
Are you asking me or are you asking Denny?
Yeah, asking you. Fools. People might not know what that is.
It's the
Fraternal Order of
Fraternal Order
Leatherheads,
of Leatherheads. Yeah.
because the old helmets used to be leather. Well, some people still have leather helmets, but
Still, yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's a great cause because they're busy fundraising at all the events and then they finance firefighters that can't afford to go conferences. So
Awesome,
it's a
awesome. That's cool.
pretty cool. I think there's only one or two Fools chapters in Canada. As far as I know there's one in Ontario, and I think there's one out west. But
Right.
yeah,
Cool.
no,
And I
that's
was
it. Short summer.
busy camping. I did a little bit of teaching. I went down east and taught a ICS course in French, and then I went to Calgary and I taught an ICS course at CAN TF2, which is the Urban Search and Rescue team down there. And I've gone to Lakeland College here, the what's it called, the Lakeland Emergency Training Center, and taught some boring fire inspector courses. I know you guys aren't into those, but evaluated new fire inspectors is what I did. And then lots of camping, and we got a new dog, which has been fun over the summer, and so that's why I wasn't doing podcasting. And
And
here we are.
congratulations to our co-host Doug, who can't participate today. But
Yes,
he's got a new baby, finally a girl.
right, right. So
As far as I know, she's healthy. Mom is good. So yeah, hopefully we can get Doug back at some point here.
oh, for sure. Yeah, he's a little busy right now. Absolutely. Okay, well, that's a great little catch up. So, okay, this week's incident, we're actually looking at two similar line of duty death events that occurred both in Ohio in October, which I was just going through looking for podcasts and which one to do, and then I saw that there was two similar incidents both in Ohio in the same month. One was in 1985 and one was in 2003. The 1985 incident doesn't have a lot of information. The fire reporting back in 85 was fairly minimal. So we're going to do these two together. Denis going to talk about the 1985 incident, and I'm going to talk about the October of 2003 incident, and that way you'll be able to keep in your mind a little bit as to which one was which. And Dirk is going to interject with a good color commentary as we go.
Plus, I was a firefighter in 1985, where you two guys were still in diapers.
I wasn't quite. I started in 86. I was a medic in 85, but I got my first basic firefighting certificate course or whatever in 86 in Borden, Saskatchewan. And you were how old then?
Never mind.
Ah,
I was old enough to drink and smoke. Just saying.
oh, really? Oh, okay.
Well, 16 is legal age in Germany.
I
Not for
suppose.
smoking, not for drinking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I was in my 30s. I'll
You're in your
confess to that.
30s. I remember hanging out in your house when you were in university and wanting to play with all your model ships in your bedroom or something. I
Yeah,
remember that.
yeah. That was a long time ago.
It was far, far away. Okay, here we go. Go for it, Denny.
So the incident that happened in 1995 happened on August the 27th, so later in the summer. And in that incident, 3 firefighters were killed when a burning silo exploded. The firefighters were at the time spraying water onto the fire from the top of the silo when the explosion initiated and occurred.
Okay, the 2003 event happened in October as well. A 44-year-old male firefighter and a 42-year-old male firefighter were fatally injured by a silo explosion at a lumber company. So this wasn't actually a farm silo; it was a lumber company, and we'll find out more about it here as we go along. The victims had responded to a mutual aid call for their aerial, which often happens in rural areas where not everybody has an aerial, and so you get a mutual aid call for their aerial apparatus from a neighboring volunteer department that was already on scene of the silo fire. I know here in Lacombe, our aerial used to go to other communities quite often, and before we had it, we had other communities coming here to fight fires when we needed an elevating device. At the time of the explosion, victim number 1 was standing on top of the silo, and victim number 2 was in the aerial basket positioned beside the top of the silo. A third firefighter was also severely injured and hospitalized, was also standing on the top of the silo. 7 other firefighters were injured during the explosion, one of which required hospitalization.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the fire departments that were involved in these incidents. And first, the 1985 incident. The victims in this particular incident, you remember that there were 3 firefighters killed. They were all members of the local volunteer fire department. On the day of the incident, the volunteer fire department had 22 members on their roster. The fire chief was individually responsible for training and periodically conducted sessions concerning firefighting techniques and equipment. The Ohio Fire Service Training Manual was used at that time as a training resource, and no training was specifically received concerning fires in oxygen limiting silos. We'll talk more about what an oxygen limiting silo is as we go along.
Yeah, and I think reading between the lines of the report from 85, they were trying to say there was no certified training because the fire chief was doing the training. But anyway, that'll come up here in the next one too. In 2003, the 2 volunteer fire departments that were involved in the incident was again similar. The Incident Command Department, whose call it was, has 23 personnel, serves a population of about 23 to 2,500 people within a rural area of about 45 square miles. The department serves the community from a single station and receives the majority of its funding through the township, so municipally funded. The mutual aid department was a little bit bigger, had about 30 personnel, serves a population of 3,500 people in a residential and industrial area of about 17 square miles, so a smaller area with more population. They also serve from a single station and is funded through the city and the township. Both of the victims that passed away were members of this department. The training and experience, we have a little more information on the 2003 incident. Yeah, victim number 1 had 14 years experience as a volunteer firefighter. He was certified by the state of Ohio as a firefighter level 1A. I'm not sure what 1A is, level 1. Maybe the first part of level 1, not a level 2, maybe. 48-hour course. Oh, okay. It was sort of a basic firefighting course. That's what I took back in 86. Was sort of one course. He taught you a little bit of everything, just enough to be dangerous. Firefighters contains a portion of the requirements of NFPA Firefighter Level 1. Additional training included some confined space rescue, training in propane emergencies, and terrorism awareness. Victim 2 had 10 years experience as a volunteer firefighter. He was also certified as a volunteer firefighter 1A. It's sort of in Alberta here, it used to be old like part 1, part 2, part 3 kind of thing was kind of your entry level. You had SCBA, a little bit of nozzles, a little bit of ladders. Additional training, confined space, terrorism awareness, firefighter safety from farm emergencies, and public information officer and electrical emergencies. The 2003 incident, we have a little bit of information about their equipment. The fire department initial dispatch response listed in the order of arrival was like engine 774 with a officer and 4 firefighters, equipment truck with 5 firefighters, another engine with 2 firefighters, a tanker with 2 firefighters or a tender, chief or incident commander via their own personal own vehicle, an assistant chief also in their own vehicle, a brush truck with an officer and a firefighter. The mutual aid department response included the aerial truck with the officer and firefighter, or 3 firefighters, 2 of which were our line of duty death victims on this call, an equipment truck with 4 more firefighters, and of course additional personnel from both departments arrived on scene in their personal vehicles, which of course is extremely common in rural North America, where more people come to the big call later on with their own vehicles if they miss the truck or don't want to take more trucks and stuff.
So the next bit of information we have on the 1985 incident is dealing with the structure itself. And the silo that was involved in this incident was an oxygen limiting type, which means that the openings in the silo, so there'd be some at the bottom, some at the top, and possibly some on the side, were supposed to be sealed to limit oxygen from entering. So the design of the silo itself was concrete and slip formed. There's a couple different designs. You will see concrete plank and cast in place concrete slip formed, where the form itself is used to cast a ring, and then it's slid upwards, and another ring is cast, and then it slides up, and another ring is cast. So that's what they call slip form. So this particular silo was a concrete, oxygen limiting design, slip form. It was 76 feet in height and 20 feet in diameter. From my experience, pretty typical dimensions. There were 5 rubber gasketed sealed hatches on the silo. 2 were on the roof. 1 was on the side loading portal near the top. So near the roof, but just down over the side, where usually there's an elevator or a chute of some sorts that's used to load silage into the silo. And 2 were at the unloading portal at ground level. They can either be under the silo or on the side of the silo, depending on the design. At the time of the incident, silage was stored to approximately 12 feet from the base. So that meant that there was, 50, 60 feet of free space above the top of the silage. And so the silage itself extended at a steep angle to approximately 40 feet up on the sides of the silo in a cone-shaped configuration. Remember, you load the silo from the top, so it doesn't drop into a nice smooth level layer. It just kind of tapers in like a volcano and fills the bottom of the silo and up the sides. So the base mount was 12 feet, and then there was about a 40-foot slope up to the loading hatch on this particular silo.
In 2003, the incident silo was located at a lumber company that employed about 60 full-time employees. The facility produced various wood products, including hardwood flooring and for bowling lanes, architectural millwork, roof trusses, and brooms. The silo was constructed in '86 and was used to supply recycled plant material to an electrical boiler. The concrete silo was originally designed as an oxygen-limiting silo, but was later modified. The silo was approximately 70 feet high and 20 feet in diameter, so about the same size as the other one. The base of the silo had 2 doors, one on each side, to access the auger pit in the base, where the auger was used to unload the silo. The silo was normally filled with wood chips and sawdust from the plant. The roof of the silo had 2 round openings, each measuring about 2 feet in diameter. The silo was filled pneumatically as wood chips were blown in through a tube at the top of the silo through the center opening. The other opening had a cover that was not in place. On the day of the incident, the silo was filled to a depth of 21 feet with wood chips. According to the fire marshal's report, the origin and cause of the fire was heat generated from the friction of a belt on a pulley at the base of the silo's auger, which ignited the combustible wood chips. The fire had smoldered for several hours prior to the arrival of the firefighters. fire marshal concluded that the explosion in the incident was a combination of events, including, at minimum, a backdraft with ignition of the fire gases and then potentially a dust explosion of some degree. If everybody remembers, of course, any kind of dust, is a combustible hazard. Any kind of dust is a combustible hazard in these silos, and the first explosion or the first event typically knocks all the dust off, and then vaporizes all those fine particles. There's been numerous dust explosions. There's a great podcast, by the way, called the Combustible Dust or Dust Explosion podcast. It's quite interesting too. He talks about all these events. Anyway, and that's what happened there. The Incident Command Fire Department had conducted annual planning for the facility and routinely made 1 or 2 calls per year at the facility. So they probably had a lot of little fires in the facility. We had a similar facility in some of the districts I've worked in as well. And often they wouldn't phone until it got really bad, and then they would give you a call. And I kept telling them, guys, come on, don't hesitate. They were 45 minutes away out in the country. I said, call us first. You can always turn us around. It's just diesel fuel, but there was a problem. These calls included 3 fires in adjacent silos, small fires in the dust collection system, and there were no previous fires in this silo.
One of the interesting phenomenons about dust explosions is that they're really not a single event. Often, and I'm not talking about the initiating event, the initiating fire, and the initiating explosion, but when you get a dust explosion, which is the combustion of the dust particles in the oxygen in the air, you will get, an overpressure event. And lots of times what that overpressure event will do is it will dislodge more dust. And there's video out there showing this happening in buildings where you've got dust sitting on the top of trusses and on top of equipment and so forth. And the first explosion disturbs all this dust, throws it into the air, and then you get the real dust explosion comes after that, and that's usually massive and catastrophic. So you'll typically hear these boom, boom. They'll be in that order. And so that's quite possibly what occurred. So the next information that we have on the 1985 incident is relating to what was noticed and how the event went forward. So on August the 27th of 1985, the fire department arrived at the scene of the silo fire around 7 p.m. So in August, 7 p.m., it's still light. The fire had been noticed earlier in the day when the owner saw wispy smoke coming from the top hatch on the silo. 3 firefighters climbed to the top of the 76-foot silo using the access ladder that's on the outside of the silo. A lot of these access ladders on silos, just by the way, are somewhat sketchy. They may or may not have safety cages around them, and they may or may not be in condition to carry the weight of a fully equipped firefighter. So that's, when they say step on the outside as you're going up on this little tiny rung that's about the size of Paul's little finger, then you got to watch yourself. So anyway,
This is your little finger talking. The PE guy going, I wouldn't get on that ladder.
Yeah, sometimes knowing too much is not good. Anyway, so 3 brave firefighters climbed to the top of the 76-foot high silo using the access ladder on the outside of the silo. Lots of times these ladders will also cross over access hatches, and the rungs themselves are in the hatches, and the hatches are often wood. So keep that in mind. It's burning, remember? On top of the silo, they noticed that one of the hatches was open. So in an oxygen limiting silo, that would not be normally the case. That hatch would be closed and sealed. After they opened the second hatch on the elevator, after opening a second hatch on the elevator, which is where the loader is, they began the application of water into the fire using a 1 1/2 inch line. Now, nowadays, we would consider an 1.5 inch line as to be totally inadequate, fed by an 1.5 inch hose almost certainly in 1985. I know in 1985 we were transitioning to 1 3/4 inch, and nowadays an 1.5 inch line is still often used in rural departments because they're trying to save water.
Yep.
This is not probably the right place to be doing that. And using a straight stream nozzle. Good for them.
Well, things go around. They went all the way through the fog nozzle and back to straight stream.
Well, straight stream is probably a good thing
or smoothbore.
From a point of air entrainment. However,
Yes.
we'll find out later that, in fact, air entrainment was a major issue. In approximately 30 minutes, 3,000 gallons of water, which was the capacity of the 2 water tank trucks, the tenders that were unseen, had been applied to the fire. At this point, the water supply was depleted and the 3 firefighters retreated from the top of the silo. So they would have climbed back down. After a delay of approximately 15 to 20 minutes, the water supply was then replenished. The trucks re-arrived full of water.
Probably no porta tank in 85, maybe.
There was, but I don't know if the attack pumper was using it. We don't have those details. So 3 firefighters once again positioned themselves at the top of the silo and continued fighting the fire, while 2 other firefighters were at ground level applying water to the bottom hatch area. So at this point, they were applying it to the area, not necessarily inside the silo, but to the hatch area. At approximately 8 p.m., so this would be 1 hour after they had been arrived, an explosion occurred. And the explosion lifted the concrete roof of the silo approximately 4 feet into the air. And as the roof began to break apart in large chunks while it was in the air, victims number 1 and 2, who were on the top of the silo, fell off the silo. And the 3rd firefighter fell into the burning silo.
Oh, wow.
A 4th firefighter who was at ground level, so he'd be 72 feet below the top of the silo, sustained a broken leg when he was hit by a piece of flying concrete roof. You can only imagine the roof was going in all directions. So victim number 3, who had fallen into the silo, was eventually removed from the silo through a hole that was subsequently cut in the side of the concrete silo 28 feet above ground. So clearly that didn't happen in a few minutes. All the casualties from the scene were transported to the local hospitals. Don't know how long a run that would have been. 2 different coroners were involved in this incident due to the victims having been transported to different hospital districts. One coroner ruled that victim 1, who had fallen off the roof and landed on the ground closest to the silo, had died due to injuries caused by the fall. The other coroner ruled that victim number 2 and 3, who had fallen into the silo, I remind you, died due to injuries caused by the explosion. However, no autopsies were performed. So this would have been, I guess, just an external examination of the bodies. After the explosion, the silage collapsed to the 28-foot level. Remember, it was sitting at the 14-foot level, I think it was.
Right, on the sides.
And you had this big cone of silage up the side. Well, this leveled it all out and it settled in at the 28-foot level. Remember, they said that they cut a hole in the side of the silo at the 28-foot level where the silage eventually ended up, and then retrieved firefighter number 3, victim number 3. So the initial indication on the investigation that the cause of the ignition was spontaneous heating of the silage. That's what started the fire. If you Google this, you will find out that if the moisture content of silage is too low, seems contrary, is too low, then spontaneous heating through degradation and fermentation will occur.
Too low.
There's not enough moisture left to quench it down. So
I thought it was the other way around.
Well, it isn't, but it's not with silage. Hay, it's the other way. But anyways, so with silage, it's got to be moist enough to not spontaneously combust. It will still heat as it degrades. However, it can't generate enough heat because of the humidity in there to actually cause a fire. So, but if it's drier than like old silage, for instance, like you put new silage on top of old silage, your new silage can ignite the old silage, for instance. There's all kinds of, which is why you really got to know what you're doing with these things. Anyways, witnesses state that the bottom and top doors of the silo were open when the fire department arrived. In other words, the silo was ventilated. Right. It was open on top to let the heat and gases out, and it was open on the bottom to let fresh oxygen in. Oxygen limiting silos, not not what you do. So that presumably was done by the personnel in charge of the silo. We think this was a farm. This would allow sufficient oxygen for spontaneous heating to occur, and the silage was sufficiently dry for this action to take place. The explosion that had occurred was due to either a buildup of combustible gases from incomplete combustion or from a dust explosion, or more likely a combination of the two. In either case, directing water into the top of the silo would have been an improper method for fighting this type of silo fire. In this incident, nothing should have been done to increase the level of oxygen inside the silo. Both opening the top hatches to apply water to the fire and draining air within the water streams increased the level of oxygen and put the gases and/or dust into the explosive range. Additionally, water spray can place the dust into suspension, thereby increasing the risk of explosion. So if you've got a smoldering fire from a spontaneous heating, so you're going to be generating a lot of incomplete combustion. So you're going to develop, smoke particles, carbon monoxide, and other components, all of which are flammable gases. And we've all been to structure fires and seen the smoke coming out the window, and at a certain point it mixes with the surrounding oxygen and it ignites, and you got this blowtorch. So imagine that suddenly occurring inside the silo quickly, causing a pressurized event, causing that silage that was all up the side of the silo to fall down, creating a dust cloud, and then that cloud of dust igniting, blowing the top off the silo, and subsequently causing the death of three firefighters who were in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Hey, Dirk, I want a technical rescue opinion on a rural call with very limited resources doing rescue through a concrete silo wall at 28 feet above ground. Obviously, you're standing in the front end loaders or something. Yeah, it's probably 6 inches thick, like Denny's mentioning, maybe thicker. What do you think of that there? You're a TR guy.
It would require a lot of specialized equipment. Not sure if that small department would have that.
You'd be using farm equipment probably, right? Whatever they
Yeah,
happen to
you would
have.
have to do a dirty breach, basically. Maybe if you have a drill, you can drill pilot holes and then start using a jackhammer or something like that. But yeah, it would require that. And in this case, I mean, the roof is already collapsed. I'm not sure what's still left above them, so that would be kind of you know the risk management there. Like, what are we going to cause here, and what is this a recovery or is this a rescue?
Yeah,
Um,
safety officer's nightmare.
yeah, I like the dirty breaches because they're the fastest, right? But you also don't want to, even if it's a recovery, you don't want to,
Right.
you know, have stuff falling on the firefighter. So
Yeah.
it would be super difficult, especially building a platform. That's always a problem. Anything that's elevated, you can't really work heavy equipment over ladder. Ladder truck with a platform would be ideal. Not sure if they had that available. That might have been another thing they could have done, right?
And imagine your mental state.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is an unsafe silo. Who knows what the structure is like? You got a buddy in there somewhere, so chances of him surviving are, let's be honest, nil. He's inside a burning concrete silo. How long does it take to breach? He's got limited oxygen. We don't even know if they were packed up or not. I suspect they were not. So, and 24 feet in the air, 28 feet in the air, how did they even know that's where the silage had ended? Thermal imaging cameras, 85?
No.
Really unlikely, yeah.
Not through the concrete anyway. You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So,
they were lucky that there weren't more fatalities because there were a lot of people standing around there, right? So yeah, from a technical like a USAP point of view, it was super difficult.
Wow. Okay.
even today, super difficult.
Yeah. Even today with more equipment. Yep. Actually, my niece had a barn burn. They had hay in the barn, and her father, my brother-in-law, kept telling her to you need to get that hay out of here. It's heating because the pile was breaking up. You could see that there was movement and stuff going on. And she tested it with her hay tester a few times. And no, it's fine. It's fine. And one morning they woke up and the barn's on fire. Turned out the battery was dead in the hay tester. But anyway, Dad was right. And yeah, that's unfortunate. But I don't think she listens to the podcast, I hope. Anyway.
So hay testers and smoke alarms. Check your battery.
Right. Very good. Fire Prevention Week and all. Here we are. 2003, at about 0650 hours in the morning, the lumber company supervisor directed a plant employee to check the silo because there was an odor of smoke in the vicinity. Employee went to the silo auger pit and quickly discovered the source of the odor. And he opened the access door. The auger pit was filled with light smoke, and there was a red glow seen within the silo through the auger port. He quickly exited the pit, shutting the access door on his way out, reported to his supervisor that the silo was on fire. 3 minutes later, they called 911 to report a fire in one of the silos. At 7:01, engine 744 en route with an officer, 4 firefighters. It arrived at the lumber company at 7:03, so not too far, only 2-minute response. Quick, must be in town. The equipment truck also arrived, and another engine and the tanker all arrived within a couple of minutes. The fire station was less than a mile away. Upon arrival, the firefighters observed light smoke coming from the top of the silo and moderate to white-gray smoke through the bottom access doors. The engine was positioned in the parking lot on the east side of the silo, and the crew pulled an 1 3/4 hand line, 44 millimeters for us Canadian folks. I saw it was like metric week or metric day a day or two ago or something. So anyway, trivia. On the northeast side of the silo, the other engine was put on standby to act as a backup. The crews from both engines entered the silo pit from the east. 2 firefighters with an 1 3/4 hand line inspected the auger pit and found some aerosol cans and an LP gas tank that they removed. Interesting. Aerosol cans, belt dressing, WD-40 maybe, something like that. LP tank, not sure why. Next, they shut off the circuit breakers for the electric power to the auger motor. Good, lockout, tagout. The auger access door had warped opened due to heat, and water was being sprayed in the opening. The 2 other firefighters stood on standby on the east side with a charged 1.5 inch line. Conditions within the auger pit were heavy smoke, little visibility, and high heat. The metal auger access door was glowing red from the intense heat, so they had a worker in here. Firefighters were successful in cooling down the metal. Burning wood chips began to fall from the auger access door and pile up on the pit floor. Incident Command was concerned that the fire would spread to other areas of the lumber company by burning embers and wanted to aggressively extinguish the fire. Command wanted to inspect the fire conditions from the top of the silo. Since the silo did not have a cage on the external ladder, he determined that it would be unsafe for firefighters to climb to the top on the ladder. Good thinking. At 7:25, he requested an aerial. The aerial as mutual aid from a neighboring volunteer fire department. At 7:28, aerial was en route with an officer and 5 firefighters. When the aerial unit arrived at 7:36, the crew observed minimal white-gray smoke coming from the top and moderate from the bottom. The incident commander directed the aerial to a position next to the silo on the north side. IC and 2 mutual aid officers. Another mutual aid officer had previously arrived on scene via private vehicle at 7:25. They had a brief discussion and decided to extend the aerial to determine the structure at the top of the silo and conditions within the silo. Both victims from the mutual aid department and another firefighter from the incident command's department, the initial department, went to the top of the silo in the aerial basket and examined the silo's condition for several minutes. The basket was brought down, and the firefighters had a conference with command, and they reported that they could not see any flame on the surface of the wood chips within the silo due to smoke.
No mention of a thermal imaging camera, I guess.
Not yet. No.
See,
Interesting.
Would have been an obvious thing to take up with you, I think.
Absolutely. 2003? Yeah, I mean, they were getting fairly common. Although, and if they had an aerial, maybe. At 8:15, oh, hang on. So at the same time, while the area was at the top of the silo, several firefighters attempted to unload burning wood chips from the auger pit using shovels and small baskets. 2 positive pressure ventilation fans were placed on the west side of the auger pit doors to remove smoke coming from underneath the silo. The fans were blowing smoke out so entry could be made from the east. The manual unloading and the use of the fans was abandoned after several minutes due to lack of progress. Must be like massive amounts of wood chips, right? The auger and other equipment at the base of the silo could not be used to unload the silo since the drive belt had been damaged by the fire and the metal was warped from the intense heat. The electrical supply was also shut off for the lockout, which is good. Don't want anybody getting caught in it. At 8:15, the IC requested equipment truck from mutual aid with the same neighboring department since SCBA bottles were beginning to run low. They had a cascade system on the equipment truck for filling bottles, and it arrived on scene at 8:24 with 4 firefighters. Upon arrival, command ordered the truck to park on the east side of the silo in the parking lot. Here we go. Incident command used a thermal imaging camera to locate hotspots on the exterior concrete surface. On the outside, the concrete was hot. They were identified on the east and west side, about 15 feet from the ground, and were beginning to grow in size. The IC decided to flow water into the top of the silo via the aerial. The engine supplied water to the aerial with a 3-inch line. Victim 1, 2, and a firefighter number 1 went to the top of the silo in the basket. Victim number 1 and firefighter 1 exited the basket onto the top of the silo. Victim number 2 remained in the basket. Made a hose connection to the platform water supply and ran a 50-foot section of 1.5-inch hose with an 1.5-inch distributing nozzle around the top of the silo. Again, just gonna put more air in. The firefighter.
So just a reminder, Paul, that they estimated there was about 21 feet of chips in the silo to start with, and the tick indicated hotspots at the 15-foot level.
So I mean that pile was pretty well burning. The firefighter number 1 lowered the hose into the access hole just as it was being charged. They sprayed water for about 5 to 10 minutes and estimated less than 1,500 gallons were pumped into the silo. At the base of the silo, the firefighters had opened a small exterior side hatch. They were pulling wood chips from the hatch, inserting a piercing nozzle supplied by an 1.75-inch hand line from the engine. The hatch was located below a large hotspot observed with the tick. A firefighter was using a pike pole to make a path for the piercing nozzle, and another firefighter was inserting the 10-foot piercing nozzle into the hatch through the wood chips. Another firefighter was assisting with the hose. Firefighters were alternating positions during this operation, and another firefighter was behind them, manning a charged 1.75-inch line as a backup.
So essentially, they're using structural firefighting techniques here.
Basically, like through a wall or something, but you're into a pile.
How high has the heat to be so you can see basic color on your tick on a concrete structure? And you were saying like with the other silo, like how thick is this? Like it's
got to be 6 inches at least, maybe more.
right? So yeah, it's crazy that they would attempt to do anything there. They could just close it up.
My guess is we're missing a whole lot on the command side. The decisions you've got the manufacturer there of the facility who's highly concerned about losing his entire facility if this fire starts emitting burning embers and so forth. So I'm pretty sure that they're there going, you got to do something to save, the facility, ensure that doesn't happen. And then you may have complacency on it's probably not the right word, but success on previous incidents because they've responded here several times in the past to dustbin fires and other silos and so they've used some successful techniques in the past, and then maybe what they think is an understanding of what's going on there, possibly without any specific training in this particular silo. Plus, this silo was not being operated as intended by its design. So you had a number of things going on there. And if you're not running a good, tight incident command system where you've got people doing planning and research, but you're tending more to rely on, you know, um, that slide set in your head. If I do this, that will happen because I've seen that happen before, and you're missing a few slides. What can happen is you'll end up in a situation where you do exactly the wrong thing, and as we will find out, that's where they were.
This plays exactly into Dr. Rich Gassaway's situational awareness presentation. I met him a couple weeks ago. He was up here at the Lakeland College actually, and of course I showed all the students, which they hadn't seen before, the um, Gordon Graham's, high risk, low frequency event. And then this is it, right? There's a video. Actually, Abbotsford Fire had a wood chip silo explode on them about 10, 12 years ago. And there was a good video on YouTube showing it all of a sudden, same kind of tactics here. And all of a sudden, boom, the thing exploded. But this way, way after, of course, this happened in
Yeah, and
'03.
that was on the outside. That was really that dust explosion. You could really see like how that all happened there. Yeah, recognition, time decision making.
Yeah,
That
recognition,
he was
prime
talking
decision
about, right?
making.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gassaway. Uh,
But you've got to also I think that's really, really important points. But the hard, the first level of hazmat training and any other training is the awareness level, right, Dirk? The first thing you learn is awareness.
yeah,
When you're wading into the swamp full of crocodiles, you don't have to be able to deal with the swamp or deal with the crocodiles. You just got to be aware that that's what's going on. So then you pick up the phone or your computer and start researching into the right things to do. But if you're not even aware that you're in a swamp full of crocodiles, then anything you do after that is going to turn out one of two ways.
we're the fire department. What
Yeah,
do? We come
yeah,
to put out fires. Okay,
yeah,
we're going to put out fires.
yeah.
Yeah.
Horseshoe lucky or sad.
Okay. The incident commander instructed the aerial crew to change the nozzle to a straight bore and spray water to the southeast section of the silo based on the growing hotspots. Victim number 2 shut the water off and firefighter, and he pulled the hose out of the silo. He recalls the smoke was yellowish and remember hearing a whooshing sound followed by a loud boom. At the base of the silo, a sudden burst of wood chips and smoke came out the hatch. It was described by firefighters like a jet engine taking off. Other firefighters on the scene reported hearing a sucking sound or a strange expanding like rush.
So, what do those sounds remind you of from your training? Backdraft.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. It sounds exactly like a backdraft.
Right,
You
where
just
you get
introduced oxygen.
right, you get a sudden overpressure followed by a sudden underpressure, and in
Yep.
this case, probably a whole lot of dust explosion leading situation afterwards.
Exactly. Yep. No, very good point. The explosion occurred. The silos were thrown to the firefighters. Several firefighters at the base of the silo near the hatch were thrown to the ground from the force of the blast.
They
They
said they
felt
felt
a
the ground
concussion.
shaking.
Yeah, they felt the ground shaking and a concussion.
That's a
The,
big bang.
the explosion occurred at the silo at approximately 8:50 hours. The top of the silo blew off and landed to the west. Victim 1 and 2 and firefighter 1 were thrown from the top of the silo and the aerial basket and were thrown approximately 70 feet onto the ground. Victim number 1 was found near the basket of a front end loader parked near the base of the silo. Victim number 2 was found at the base of the west side of the silo, and firefighter 1 fell into a garbage filled dumpster, which helped break his fall.
Man, was he lucky.
Yeah, no kidding. Debris rained down on the scene, injuring 8 firefighters and 2 lumber company employees after the debris had settled. The firefighters recall hearing multiple pass alarms, personal alerts going. The incident command ordered an accountability check and radioed for rescue units to come to the scene. Firefighters on the scene immediately began administering first aid to the injured. Victim 1 and 2 were transported to regional hospitals via ambulance where they were later pronounced dead. A helicopter transported firefighter 1 and another firefighter injured by the blast and to a regional trauma center. Incident Command had one firefighter hospitalized with a broken foot and 4 firefighters treated and released from emergency. Firefighter 1 was hospitalized with a broken arm and leg. 2 other firefighters from the mutual aid department were seen and released in the emergency room. 2 plant employees from the lumber company were also hospitalized.
So the firefighter that was thrown from the roof and landed in the dumpster got a broken leg and a broken arm.
Wow.
Could have been worse.
A lot worse. Just, I mean, absolute luck.
Yeah, he was rush out and buy a lottery ticket that day.
Yeah.
So a little bit on the cause of death, which we've already talked about a little bit for the 1985 incident. And remember, there were 3 fatalities in that one. 2 firefighters were blown off the roof and 1 fell into the silo. So the cause of the death for firefighters number 2 and number 3, which was by the one coroner, and the cause of death for the other victim was by a separate coroner. So the first 2 were injuries caused by the explosion. Not sure what that means. I can think of many types of injuries that explosion would.
Blunt force trauma, I guess.
Blunt force trauma. You can have overpressure injuries. You can have a bunch of stuff. And for victim number 1, it was called injuries caused by fall from the silo. So one of the first 2 victims, 2 and 3, 1 fell in the silo, 1 fell out the silo. And victim number 1, who was injuries caused by the fall from the silo, he fell off the silo. So basically, the explosion was determined to have been the cause of death for all 3.
The 2003 incident, the county medical examiner's findings were the cause of death for both victims with blunt force injuries from getting hit by the explosion and landing on the ground, I assume.
Right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about recommendations and some discussion on those. Paul, are these from NIOSH reports, these recommendations?
Yes, our fire administration for the 85 one.
Okay,
U.S. Fire Administration.
So FEMA, right? So
are they still up to date, Paul?
These are the latest published accounts that FEMA, U.S. Fire Administration and NIOSH had.
Okay.
Right.
The one had been updated. I'm not sure which had been updated a few years ago.
Right. So for the 1985 incident, so that's the triple fatality, recommendation number 1 stated that during firefighting operations, water should not be directed into a fire through the top hatches of an oxygen limiting silo. And so a little bit about that. A fire in oxygen limiting silos can potentially be very hazardous since explosive gases can be contained. So these are a non-ventilated silo, essentially. Any increase in oxygen may place the gases within their explosive range. One method of fighting this type of fire that has met with success in the past involves the injection of liquid nitrogen, which of course would then gasify and blanket, or what they sometimes call inerting, will inert the inside of the silo, and then the fire, think of your fire triangle: fuel, heat, oxygen. So if you take the oxygen away, then the fire will go out. So one method to attack these fires is injecting liquid nitrogen or injecting carbon dioxide into the silo to extinguish the fire. Manufacturers of oxygen limiting silos normally have instructions to accompany their silos on how to deal with fires. Further information can also be obtained by Googling a bulletin called Extinguishing Silo Fires, published by the Northeast Regional Agricultural Engineering Service. I didn't
go look and see if that's still available.
But yeah, I should also say that if you Google extinguishing silo fires, you're going to get pages of information.
Right.
So these are not abnormal events. They happen all the time.
So for the recommendation, again, like any silo fire, or in general, any fire, we don't want to fight a fire from above. you don't want to work above the fire. That's why we say any house fire could be the basement, could be the attic, right? We don't want to go up there. But it seems like, oh, there's a silo. Oh, let's check what's burning from the top. And I remember that the fire department I know responded to a silo. I'm not sure if it was a fire. I wasn't there. All I know is that they went up to the top of the silo, opened the hatch, and two guys got knocked down by the carbon monoxide that's obviously in these areas. And they weren't masked up because nobody thought of that, right? So again, kind of like for me, I have zero skin in the game when it comes to silos or silo fires. Don't go up there. Just if you can, work from the bottom, but not from the top because you're above the fire.
So
Is that
so
kind
the
of
yeah, there are two types of silos. There's oxygen limiting silos, which are intended to be a closed system from the point of view of air and gases moving in and out of them. So they generally are pretty safe from the point of view of you can't have fires because there's not supposed to be any air, oxygen, in other words, in the silo. And then there are the other type of silo, which are essentially ventilated silos. And these are the ones you most commonly see on farms. And you'll see the ladder on the outside has got kind of like a chute built around it. And you climb up inside, and there are all these doors, hatches, I don't know, every 6 or 8 or 10 feet or whatever. And you pull the hatches off, and that's how you unload this. When you need silage, you go up to the top of wherever the silage is, you pull that door off, and you fork out a bunch of silage. It falls down the chute at the bottom, and that's how you get access to it. So these ones are not airtight by any means whatsoever, and you have to approach those in a completely different manner. They're not the same at all. They're not going to build up huge, vast quantities of combustible gases. They don't have the same properties when they're burning as a air limiting silo, or an oxygen limiting silo. So yeah, you got to know what's a duck and what's a goose, right? When you go to these things, um, so they're not all the same, and you got to have an understanding of what you're dealing with. And I think that's where recommendation 2 comes in. Recommendation 2 says when not being filled or emptied. So in other words, when you're not loading the silo from that hatch near the top, and you're not emptying it by opening the auger pit door at the bottom, so which obviously the silo is open at those points in time. So in an oxygen limiting silo is properly sealed, when not being filled or emptied, the silo hatches should be kept closed, and you must do proper maintenance on the silo. So that should be performed to ensure the integrity of the oxygen limiting features. This is going to come up, Paul, when you talk about the 2004
right?
incident.
Yeah,
So if an oxygen limiting silo is properly sealed, there's very little likelihood of fire occurring by spontaneous heating. You can still get the heating, and you'll still get gas generation, and you don't want to go in there because it's a IDLH, immediately dangerous life or health, confined space, but you're not likely to have fire because there's insufficient oxygen to support a fire.
right.
So the manufacturer of the silo, if you're in any doubt about this, should be contacted for proper operating and maintenance procedures for the silo. So if you're the farmer or the wood chip guy who owns a silo, you should know how to operate that silo before you start operating it, right? I would also suggest that know your fire district. You should know how to deal with incidents in silos of that type and be able to recognize them as you're driving down the road, which I can do, and I'm sure you can do too, once you know what to look for. Additionally, further information on minimizing the possibility of a silo fire can be, again, by
Same.
Googling things like extinguishing silo fires that we had already referenced previously.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm guilty of it too because I was a firefighter, eventually officer here in Lacombe, and we have silos all over the place, and rural, agricultural, dairy farms, etc. And we didn't have any adequate pre-plans or training on what to do. And I retired from here in 2013 from this fire department, and then Didn't have as many out in Clearwater, not as much agriculture. But anyway, and I, didn't do it, which is
But
bad.
at least an evening, every few years on an awareness level,
Yep,
I think is your step one, right? Like, don't step in that because it's not good.
exactly.
At least
Step
learn
one.
that and who to call.
Yeah, right, exactly. In 2003, the recommendations were similar to what we've already been talking about. Recommendation 1 says train officers and firefighters on the hazards associated with different types of silos and the appropriate firefighting tactics. The thing around here in central Alberta, getting a truckload of carbon dioxide or a truckload of nitrogen is really easy because they use nitrogen for everything, all kinds of pipeline purging and tank purging and stuff. So a person could get that fairly quickly, 24/7, 365. All you need to know is who to call. So critical information was not established during the size up or determined in their pre-plan that this silo was a modified oxygen limiting silo. The IC had successfully fought a silo fire in the past at the lumber company. However, that fire was in a conventional silo. The tactics and strategies used by firefighters in this incident was modified, and it should have been treated as oxygen limiting by firefighters. The two types you talked about already, I won't cover that. And oxygen limiting need to be sealed. Both types of silos can be found on farms, sawmills. Critical firefighters to realize the type of silo prior to beginning firefighting operations. This silo no longer had the tightly sealed top hatches, hence modified oxygen limiting. The amount of oxygen entering the silo was significant to initiate, one, the fire, and two, propagate it more as it burned through the wood chips, which has, unlimited amount of combustible fuel, basically. All it needed was oxygen. It had everything it needed to do it. It had the heat, it had the fuel. SOGs for oxygen limiting silo fires. That was the other recommendation number 2. If you have silos, you should have an SOG that people can be trained on and you can follow to try to minimize the chance of a low frequency, high risk event that's going to result in line of duty deaths. Confirming pre-plans, do not direct water or foam through top hatches. Dirk, you talked about that already. Why are you on top of this fire? Why are you above the fire? And of course, will allow oxygen to enter and cause backdraft-like explosion of fire gases. Do not enter, breach, or open any external hatches in an attempt to extinguish the fire. If the top hatches are open, firefighters should not close them if there's smoke coming out of the top, especially if the side road is vibrating or making unusual sounds, because you're making a pressure vessel, right? You just made a pressure vessel. It's like a sea can, like that fatality in BC and Enderby, where the sea can was not on fire. It was beside the fire. There was very little fuel in the sea can. It got warmed up from the building beside it, and the doors blew open and killed the captain that happened to be standing in the path of the doors. You're making a pressure vessel. Lockout, tagout, they did that in the one. Roof hatches should be safe to close if it's quiet for several days and there's no smoke coming from the hatches. Should be closed but not securely to permit relief of pressure. Leave the silo closed up for up to 3 weeks or until the fire consumes all the oxygen and it self-extinguishes. Establish a collapse zone. Keep unauthorized personnel away from the area in case of an explosion. Some silos have external valves to inject carbon dioxide or liquid nitrogen from compressed gas cylinders to extinguish the fire. If the silo continues to burn, seek assistance from the manufacturer. Just like if your Tesla's burning, seek assistance. Dirk.
Yeah, that was just crossing my mind with the carbon dioxide. Would that be a requirement for the silo operator to have this on site, or would that be something that the fire department has to get uh, along the pre-planning? Because that's, I mean, where you get it from, and in a short term, how much do you need? Because that's a big silo. I mean, 73 foot tall, 20 foot in diameter. That's a lot of space. I mean, less what you have in there, but to inert it with a
In,
gas, like where do you
in,
get it from?
Well, in Alberta, it'd be easy because there's liquid nitrogen trucks all over the place because they use it a lot for oil field, hazardous materials, chemical plant
Right.
operations. So, you could phone numerous companies, but Liquid Air is one, for example, to bring a truckload over. But, it's going to be hours.
Yeah, but the answer to this is one word: pre-planning.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
No, that's a possibility. Have somebody on speed dial.
Yep.
Oh
Give a
yeah,
plug.
dispatch. Dispatch knows everything, right? That's what we say. Well, we need a backhoe, call dispatch. We need a vac truck, call dispatch. We need more lumber, just call dispatch.
And honestly, I think you'd be surprised. I don't think the volume is that great. I mean, you're going to hook your hose up to the side of it. You're going to open your hatches on top. You're going to fill it full of carbon dioxide or nitrogen, until you get it flowing out the top. Close the hatches. Go home. I'll see you in a month. I think you may want to leave it a small volume continuously going in there for leakage, but I don't think it'd be huge. I think a single axle truck would do it. You're not talking some.
Yeah, because remember the liquid oxygen nitrogen is liquefied. There's a lot in there, right? It's the same as a propane cylinder. One propane cylinder will do a lot.
I'd use carbon dioxide just because it's so much easier,
It is, yeah.
and more available. You just go down to the local brewery, Dirk, and hijack a truck.
Yeah, the distillery, the
Yeah,
brewery.
well, or
I like it.
I'll never leave.
or your local Coke distributor because or bottler because they got carbon dioxide trucks sitting there. So,
I'd be
well,
sitting there, it's like, why did I come here? I forgot.
or
Yeah,
get a few 2.4s and throw them in the top.
good, good point. Good point. Uh, the fire department should ensure that pre-emergency planning is completed for silos within their jurisdictions. If you've got a particular risk, you need to plan for it. But I remember trying to sell the aerial truck concept to the county here. Now, Lacombe County is a fairly intense agricultural area, lots of good soil. There's lots of greenhouses and dairy farms and all huge riding stables, huge buildings. And I went around the county and took pictures of all these places and went to gave it to the fire chief to build his case. I actually did a PowerPoint presentation, and the county said, "What do we need a ladder truck for? We don't want a ladder truck. We don't need a ladder truck." And all the city was asking for him was to sign a grant application to do it together and get $100,000 from the government. And the county didn't want to sign. And one of the second year we had the ladder truck, we had a huge machinery shed, concrete tilt up building that was combination potato storage, etc. And we brought the ladder truck out to it, and it actually saved the building because it was part of the roof had collapsed, and we were able to get water in the truss spaces and stop the fire and put a stop to it and save it. And the county was still saying, we don't need it, but the pre-planning is the problem. There's a Canadian company, just so our people know, that does pre-planning software out of Ottawa called APX. And they have a wonderful software package that you can do pre-planning on your iPad. It's super easy. It uses Google Maps, and you can go and identify your hazards at least, and who to contact. You can add that in there if you look at the tag on the silo and probably pop it in there as a picture, and you could phone them when you're on a call. The stuff's out there. It's just having the time to do it. For number 4, facilities with oxygen limiting silos should ensure proper operation and maintenance. Very important. That may have been a problem in this lumber yard because they'd modified the silo and wasn't maintained, obviously, because there was a belt and an overheated bearing or something that started a fire. There was LP gas in the bottom. They were probably trying to cut a bearing off. That's why. Why would you have propane in the silo? You're probably trying to loosen something with heat and started a fire. Hot work, another often cause of fires. Hot work. Yeah. I see Boston is requiring training and a permit for all hot work in the city now. People have to take a training course to prevent accidents from hot work.
Good initiative. Enforcing it isn't
Yeah,
hard.
yeah. Municipalities consider wiring exterior placards with specific silo information for use during firefighting. I'm just going to breeze over these because we're going long. Silo manufacturers and research organizations should consider researching causes and mechanisms of silo fires involving wood products and develop engineering approaches to reduce risks to firefighters. This was the state fire marshal's report mentions the role of wood products as a secondary cause of the silo explosion. While a backdraft of the byproducts of combustion is a likely cause of the explosion in the incident, there's been no scientific research on silo fires and explosions with wood products or sawdust. Modeling the dynamics of oxygen-limiting silo fires could result in greater understanding of the engineering controls needed for control of these fires. Blast panels.
There
Sorry,
should
go ahead.
certainly be a lot of knowledge on dust explosions in bag houses and ventilation systems. And I can't help think when I read this that some of that knowledge could be extended to this particular use of a silo, because they were basically had a silo. It was an oxygen limiting type, but that's not how they were using it. They were using it as a holding tank, if you will.
Basically.
So I think that anything that would have, some explosion intervention equipment engineered into it, could have helped in this situation. Just like there would be on a bag house, for instance. Now, a bag house is a big boxy building full of filters, where you pull contaminated air through, and similar thing, highly dusty environment full of combustible particles and oxygen.
We're seeing similar stuff with the lithium-ion battery storage buildings for energy storage, and that building engineering controls into it to vent gases, to allow for deflagration panels, stuff like that, to try to let them burn if it happens, because putting them out obviously is a lost cause. That's where those firefighters
have an incident, just don't make it a catastrophic incident.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, unfortunately, it needs an incident or a near miss that the department's starting to look into it. As you said, the storage facilities for the batteries that UL did I think it was either a close call or line of duty death. I can't remember.
Close calls in
It was a close
Surprise,
call, right?
Arizona.
Exactly. So that should be an eye opener for every department that deals with these things. That the problem is, I think, companies and even cities, they build these things and don't tell the fire department that they even exist.
Yeah,
Because honestly, I couldn't tell you if we have these things or not. I mean, it's Alberta, so we probably don't. But
yeah, we do. But the fire departments, they don't know about it, or they don't know how to respond. Although it is changing. There's been 2 or 3. There was just one 2 weeks ago in Idaho, battery energy storage system in Idaho, and the fire department just, they let it burn. They just, we're not going to do anything. We're just going to sit here, prevent what we can from extension, and unfortunately the toxic gases and stuff lead to evacuations, and but we're learning slowly from
you got to deal with the situation, but you got to know, and I think for me, like, even with these silos, it's so hard for us as a fire department to not do anything when it comes to suppression efforts, right? I mean, we can do we do the hazmat thing, we cordon everything off, evacuation, all the stuff, but that's not cool.
Put
right?
the fire out. Come on. Yeah.
We got to put the fire out, right? And that's a tough sell to the not just the line firefighters, but also to command staff, right?
Denny's doing the rule of thumb on the camera there. He says, "Remember the rule of thumb. If your thumb doesn't cover up the hazmat, you're too close." Yeah.
That's a good rule.
Yeah.
But so yeah, going to that, do you know what's in your fire district? Firefighters live everywhere. Half the career firefighters in Edmonton live out in the rural areas, because I won't get into that. But anyways,
that's true. Yeah.
Be nosy, man. You see something new going on, get out your badge, walk in and say, I need to look around. I'd like to be familiar if there's hazards here that might affect, my life and how we would deal with an incident here. And
but I want to watch.
Take that back to your planning and your fire prevention people.
But I want to watch TSN and in the Lazy Boy after lunch, or play pickleball.
Don't be like that.
Yeah, I play pickleball. I gotta find
that about on your spare time when you're driving into your bedroom community.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And then good firefighters do this. Good firefighters they pre-plan. Good
never off duty. Never off duty.
But it's also a problem. You mentioned Edmonton. It's a big department. Same as like Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto. Try to change something in Toronto. right? And convince people, hey, don't put out the fire, or hey, I want you to bring a 65 line into a high-rise building. It's like,
What? A
what are you talking
65? That's way too heavy to carry. What are you talking about?
Exactly. And then those are the problems. Like smaller departments have that advantage of being able to do this because there's less bureaucracy, there's less management
Oh, I'm
involved.
glad you think so.
Well, I hope it would be that
You
way.
hope. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
everything's scalable, just so you know.
Yeah, exactly. It's just hard. There's less
Yeah,
resources to do it
yeah.
with.
But the
But
timeline is also scalable. If it takes you a year, a big department takes 10 years.
But
Yeah.
Right?
departments can change. Unfortunately, it's often due to events.
Yeah.
If we look at London or the UK buying tall aerials, responding aerials to high rises, which they didn't used to do, but after Grenfell Tower, now they do that. Look at Toronto. Toronto had a huge fire on the 401 of a petrochemical tanker or something, and they had to call the airport and everybody else to come foam it down. Toronto bought a foam truck. Wow, they bought a 230-foot Bronto. I had to get that in there. Dirk, you knew it. Because hey, they're preparing for their risks, and that's what we need to do. But it needs to go top to bottom, bottom to top in the whole organization, and this is preparing for risks. Silos.
Okay, cool.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening to another Emergency Traffic Podcast. We appreciate your interest and hope that you find them interesting and informative. Give us a star, a like, a thumbs up on whatever app you use to listen to us with. It means a lot to us and the algorithms that promote our podcasts amongst the various listeners. You can follow us on Podcast Traffic on Twitter or our Facebook page, the Emergency Traffic Podcast.
Be safe, be nice.
Stay low and go.
Right on. And what did there was a quote from Brunacini this week or last week? It was, if you think training is expensive, wait till you have a line of duty death. So no, don't wait. Listen to our podcast and train.
Do better.
All right. Excellent.